I'm JohnBerry555 and today I'm continuing my series of MASH retro reviews. Today we'll be reviewing the 8th episode of the 5th season, Dear Sigmund. So in this episode, Sidney Friedman comes to the 477 and well, he's writing a letter to Sigmund Freud. Yep, who died before World War II even began, right? Let's double check that date. Correction, 3 weeks after World War II started in Europe. And to be fair, there is actually a moment in the episode where they basically call out that Freud is dead. And therefore the premise of the episode is basically he's writing a letter to no one in his attempt to basically deal with his own insecurities, deal with his own depression from recently losing a patient to, they don't say it, but it's implied heavily that a patient of Sydney committed suicide. And that's weighing on Sydney's mind. So he goes to the 477 for a vacation, to relax, to recuperate. Not where people would normally go, but because of this framing device, we learn that basically Sydney sees the people of the 477 as having mastered how to stay sane by being crazy. And then we see a bunch of small vignettes illustrating that stuff from, jokes that they were telling, events, like everything. I'm not going to go over every pair, but I'm not going to go over every set, but some are pretty well known, such as Hawkeye walking into post-op while wearing a suit and swimming fins. So that's a pretty well known one. There's several others as well. And one of the running one of the running bits throughout this episode is that someone's been playing a bunch of practical jokes. And we find out that that is BJ. And we learn a lot about a lot of these characters through Sydney's eyes. Another thing that occurs in this episode too is that there's a bomber pilot who arrives after he had to bail out of his plane, and Hawkeye decides to bring him to ground because he's flying high above in the sky and he is totally oblivious to the realities of war. And so Hawkeye makes him aware of that stuff, having him help, in the medical stuff. And he sees a victim of a bombing. Not sure if it's the UN American forces or if it's the North Korean and Chinese. Doesn't matter to the little girl. She's still injured. And that causes the fighter pilot, or the bomber pilot, I should say, to break down, And he apologized, but Hawkeye basically says I'm summarizing, you don't have to apologize for anything. And quote, 20,000 feet is a long way to come down. He literally brings the pilot down to earth and realizes that the war is not as clean as it appears from up in the sky. So a very much emotional scene and highlighting the realities of war. We don't see too much of that stuff, but it's so brilliantly illustrated in this episode. And then to contrast that too is also there is a ambulance driver that dies while transporting patients, causing the ambulance to tip over. Now, we don't know if he died in the crash or whatnot. Doesn't matter. He's dead and the patients need tending once again. And we get this beautiful scene where Radar writes the letter for part to the ambulance's driver's family. And that's part of the framing of basically framing who Radar very much is. Naive, childlike, but also holding the entire camp together. That's how Sydney sees Radar. And honestly, a pretty good characterization. Sometimes I do feel like, especially now in these later seasons match, they do a lot of making Radar too naive. I do like, naive in the sense that he still has his childlike wonder. That's, I think, how they should have handled it. Because I think that's a good way. Like, the fact that he can maintain childlike wonder is just beautiful. And I wish they leaned more into that rather than making him increasingly naive as a character. Because, yeah, he's holding the camp together as this episode demonstrates. And I think this episode demonstrates that his childlikeness, his wonder, if you will, and naivety in a way that does not take away from the fact that he is doing a lot of stuff that someone who's truly childlike would not be able to do. So yeah, overall, there's just a lot of great things about this episode. I could talk more about individual scenes and vignettes, but to do so, that would take a lot because there is a lot in this episode, a lot of small little characterization, character moments that help us understand our main characters a bit better. This episode, I think, also does a very good job of highlighting basically all the changes that we've seen in Margaret from the previous season, cementing who she is now. She's professional at that, but she's not only professional. She has some other interests in that. We see her playing a poker game. Margaret 2 seasons ago would never have been doing that, but now she is. And this episode, I think, does a good job in showing that Margaret is no longer the same character that we once knew. Yes, we've already been seeing that in this season, but this episode, I think, very much demonstrates and shows and tells us. Oftentimes, when doing, storytelling, there's often saying show, don't tell, but sometimes you also do need to tell. And this episode finds a great, fantastic framing device to do both showing and telling. So that's what I'm going to say about this episode because there's a lot more to say, and I think we should continue the discussion in the comment section down below. What was your favorite little vignette? What was your favorite little thing that we learned about one of our characters? And every character was highlighted in some form or another, so there's a lot to continue discussing. So I look forward to seeing your response in the comment section, and I hope to see you next week for the next episode. Thank you for watching my latest retro review. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please be sure to give this video a like. Also, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't done so already, and I hope to see you for my very next video.